Wow, you're here. I can't believe you're back. So something about one must have piqued your interest. Look, to be fair with you, I had to look up how to say that piqued your interest. I wasn't too sure. And there are all these videos with guys having a dialogue with themselves, but being very funny. Like, hey, dude, what's piqued your interest? They all happen to be American and they happen to be guys. I don't know why that has to go together, but are you funny? Do you think you're funny? Welcome. Welcome to part two, which is on clauses and punctuation. If I asked you what comes to mind when you think of the word clause, a lot of you would probably think of Santa Claus or Klaus. Is he German? Or we can think of the word clause as in bear clause, or cat clause, meow. Or we can think of a legal term, a clause, which I really don't know what that means, to be honest with you. I just know it's legal. And of course, the part that I'm interested in, which is clause as building block of a sentence. So what's a clause? At a minimum, it contains a subject, say the doer, which could be a noun, remember like an American guy, or a pronoun like he, and a verb, which would be the action. Often it also contains an object. A clause can be independent in that it can stand alone as a sentence all by itself, which would be something like I ate. Or funnily enough, guys, today is Good Friday, and what, I guess one of the most prominent sentences there in the Bible and related to Jesus was Jesus wept. But other types of clauses, remember, would be subject, verb, object. So it'd be I ate vegetables or I don't eat chocolate. Look, from those examples, you've worked out what an object is. An object receives the verb affects, if you like. So eat what? Eat vegetables. Don't eat what? Don't eat chocolate. Okay, let's have a look at the different types of sentences that are made up of clauses. The first part is what we call a compound sentence. So a compound sentence is made up of at least two independent clauses, remember, all by themselves, joined with a linking word. Most common would be but, spelt with one T, and so. So you've got that example of I do not eat well, but I run every day. Please note that the comma goes before the what we call the linking word, and they're made up of the fanboys linking words, and these are for, and, nor, but with one T, or, yet, and so, and then we put a comma before them, and then they're followed by a subject plus verb, and maybe an object of a second independent clause. Object or adverb of the second independent clause. So remember, an adverb can tell you how or where or when, or in this case, how often you do something. In this case, it's every day. Well, the other type of sentence that we're going to look at is called the complex sentence. It's so complex, that I need to unpack this. And that's made up of at least one independent clause, all by itself, and a dependent clause. Please don't go. I need you. Stay. Will you stay? And these are joined with a linking word, but a different linking word. Things like although, even though, if, because, when, after, before, while. Hence, we can understand why it's complex. Yeah. You've got this example. Although I run every day, I don't lose weight. The other example of those would be that they're just switched around. So the independent clause comes first, and then it's followed by the linking word, and then you've got the dependent clause. Please don't go. So you've got something like, I don't lose weight, stands by itself, although I run every day. So remember, when you start the sentence with the dependent clause that begins with a linking word, although, even though, if, because, and so on, you must put a comma before the independent clause. Before that comes in, it's almost like you take a breath, you do the big reveal, but you don't put a comma if you begin the sentence with the independent clause, because you don't want to separate them. It's like, please don't separate me, not even with a comma. But anyway, guys, we are up to punctuation, or if you want to sort of be in the know, we can call it punctuate or punk. Now, clauses and connecting words link directly to sentence punctuation. So we're going to look at 4 areas, and these can normally lead to the most common errors when writing. God, I almost lost track of why I was doing this. So the first one is commas. Then we're going to look at apostrophes. We're going to look at hyphens, and then we're going to look at what we call end dashes, which I think there could be a confusion there between the two. And guys, I can tell you a few anecdotes of like why punctuation is important. Sentences from let's say grandma, where and then you meant to pause and say let's say grandma, or a woman without her man is nothing, and then you change the punctuation and it becomes a woman without her man is nothing. Or there was even a really inappropriate joke about Uncle Jack, a horse, helping him dismount. Again, all to do with punctuation. But I'm going to tell you an anecdote that was mine, and this was back in the day when I smoked. And I live in a city that's very hard on smokers, but I would always smoke in front of this sign that just had no smoking offenders will be prosecuted. Clearly, that's not what I wanted to say, but because of the lack of punctuation, I could smoke in front of it and say, look, it says right here, no smoking offenders will be prosecuted. What they clearly wanted to say was, no smoking offenders will be prosecuted. So, guys, remember what we looked at before when we were looking at clauses. We use commas between two independent clauses. So remember the fanboys. We also use commas when a sentence begins with a connecting word. Remember although, even though, if, because, and so on. And then it's followed by an independent clause. And a great example of that is, when people say, look, if I won the lottery, if I won millions of dollars, I would do this and I would do that. They would suddenly show their generosity and you think, well, why don't you do it now? Why aren't you sharing your money now? Or it's similar to all those billionaires that are pledging, once I die, I'm going to give away all my wealth. It's like, well, can't you do a bit of it now? Especially seeing that you're planning on living forever. But anyway, guys, what I want to say about commas, so we've covered those, but remember commas, always think of it as whenever you take a breath, whenever you pause. So a good example would be whenever you're setting up a scene. So if you say something like, in Sydney, in Australia, at home, anything would have a comma after it, or also with time, like if you said in 1973, in December, at lunch, at noon, in the morning, in the evening. I don't want to delve too deeply into it. There are other instances where you would use a comma, but remember those. So the sentences that we looked at, fanboys, the complex sentence with although, if, and also those introductory phrases like, in the morning and so on. Guys, next we're up to apostrophes, and we use them to show possession. So you've got John's car, the children's father, the president's portrait. Well, that's looking a bit orange. Now, when the singular noun ends in S, we put apostrophe and then S. Chris's car. But when the plural nouns end in S, so these tend to be regular nouns, regular in that most nouns we form the plural with an S, the apostrophe comes after the S, and we don't add another S. So we've got the president's portraits, more presidents. So look, we also use apostrophes to show omissions. G'day, which is basically good day. O'clock, which is of the clock, and most commonly in contractions like don't and your, because remember, your is a contraction of you are. However, we don't use them for plural abbreviations, and believe it or not, all I can think of is YMCAs, for example, WCs, and we don't use them for plural numbers like the 80s or the 90s. I really need to do a section on intonation because I realized I was ending there, so it should be the 90s. Look, lastly, we've got hyphens and end dashes. So think of hyphens, they're basically shorter than an end dash, and an end dash is the width of an N on your standard keyboard. Now, what's the difference between them? Hyphens are used to join words. So we create a compound noun or a compound adjective. So think of an example of like self-care, a lot of words with self-awareness, self-esteem, self-confidence. But we use it a lot to create adjectives. Remember, an adjective would modify a noun. So English has got this amazing flexibility, if you like, where you can create any adjective. So if something has a fast pace, it becomes fast paced. If it's got good quality, we can say high quality food or high quality production, and basically create that kind of compound adjective out of nothing. If you like, we could talk about green-eyed monster, open-mouthed, incredible flexibility. I'm not really going to go into the grammar of it, how they're formed. Like it could be an adverb plus a participle, like brightly lit, and so on. I'm more interested in the use of hyphens there. Interesting note about hyphens that we usually use them at the beginning when the compound word is first formed, and then we drop it as it becomes part of the vernacular. Now, I just wanted to say the word vernacular. So you've got the example of homemade had a hyphen, takeaway had a hyphen. So always watch that space. Now, N dashes, on the other hand, they just show a range. So when you're talking about Monday to Friday or Mon to Free, as once someone said, you use N dash. You've got 12 to 3 p.m. You've got a flight from Sid to Melb. Those that are not Australian, which I doubt I've got an international audience, but anyway, it'd be Sydney to Melbourne and so on. It could be Burl to Par. And we can also use N dashes to add more emphasis to extra information in a sentence. This would be more dramatic, say, than a parenthesis. So you would say something like, parenting is not easy, N dash, and you say, no matter how many books you read. And that way you can sound really dramatic. All right, everyone, just a quick knowledge check here. I'd like you to punctuate the following sentence using these marks. There's an apostrophe, there's a hyphen, an N dash, and a comma. And the sentence says, after work, the dog's owner, who's easygoing, will pick them up anytime from 3 to 5. Guys, I tried to read it without punctuation, of course, because I didn't want to give the answer away. Again, pause it, and then you'll have the reveal. So guys, here we have it. We say after work, comma, we take a breath. The dog's owner, apostrophe after the S, because there's 3 of them, they're plural. Whose is who is, so it's a contraction. So we put an apostrophe. Easygoing, guys. This could be a bit contentious or contentious because some might say, well, it's become part of the vernacular, therefore you don't need it. But look, you can always play it safe. And then any time from 3 to 5, it's a range, you use the N dash. I hope you went well. So everyone, what I'd like you to do here, I want you to tick all the examples where the apostrophe is used correctly. Again, I've designed this to be interactive, but because I've turned it into a video format, you're going to have to pause it, decide, because I'm going to reveal it promptly. And again, here you have the correct responses. I hope you did well. Wow. I really can't believe we've reached the end of this module. It has been an endeavor, I tell you that much. It has taken almost as long as the sequel to Avatar. And I don't know what it is. I don't know if I feel tired. I don't know if, because I was churning out these videos before. And now I've left with the predicament that in order for me to do part 3, still with the free subscription, I need to do it in 4 days. So remember, part 3 is going to be on easily confused words and striking the right tone. I hope you enjoyed it. See you shortly, I hope.